Good evening. Thank you for coming. First, let me introduce Stephanie the Wonder Rabbit. Stephanie is a technology geek. She likes to chew on Ethernet cables. Fortunately for Stephanie, Ethernet is low voltage. Unfortunately for me, I now always know where my network problems are. That's why I went wireless right there. Let me introduce myself. I'm Dr. Max Kilger, and I'm a social psychologist by training. I'm the chief behavioral scientist at the HoneyNet Project. I'm one of the data geeks there, as well as one of two profilers in the group. So, just to sort of introduce you to sort of where I'm coming from, I started using computers about 30 years ago. I started with a PDP-11, flipping the lights and the switches, and reading and programming. It was a lot of fun. And then worked my way through undergraduate school and the University Computer Center, slaving away. And when I got to graduate school, I went to graduate school in Silicon Valley. And that was really interesting because not only was there a lot of cool stuff going on, it was about the time that the digital revolution was happening. Sort of growing up with the Apple II, the Apple I, and I hung out with a lot of really interesting people. And pretty soon I said, you know, it's not just sort of geek stuff that's really cool, but it's really, what is technology doing to us? How is technology changing the way we behave, the way we think, the way we perceive things, and the way that others sort of treat us? And pretty soon I said, hey, this is pretty interesting. I think this is sort of what I'd like to do and study. So that's what I'm doing some research on. So tonight we're going to look a little bit at digital identity and some of the psychological things and some of the technical things with identity, and hopefully we'll learn a little something and have a bunch of fun. So the first thing I want to do is start off the evening with a little relevant entertainment. So hopefully this isn't going to be too loud, but let's give it a whack and see what happens. Please work, God.
Where am I?
In the village.
What do you want?
Information.
Whose side are you on?
That would be telling. We want information. Information. Information.
You won't get it.
By hook or by crook, we will.
Who are you?
The new number 2.
Who is number 1?
You are number 6.
I am not a number. I am a free man.
Okay, just a little clip from The Prisoner for those of you who are old enough to remember or have seen the reruns. Pretty cool show. I saw an entire psychology class at the university taught on that show every week. So, why don't we go ahead and get started? Identity. Our sense of identity is really a necessary thing for our psychological well-being. If you don't have a good sense of who you are, that's really going to cause you a lot of problems. And so, identity is a very key element to sort of having a reasonably decent, well-deserved, well-lived life on this planet. Identity is also multidimensional. It's not just one thing. Hey, I'm Max. It's got legal dimensions. It's got social dimensions. It's got all sorts of kinds of dimensions that are kind of interesting. We're going to explore some of those dimensions tonight. So it's also sort of multidimensional. Interestingly, digital technology has had a really significant impact on our sense of identity and how we construct it. That is, how we see ourselves and how others see us. And hopefully, I'll just give you a tiny glimpse about what might happen or think about what we might become as ghosts in the machine. First, let's start out with the idea that identity is a process. And it begins at birth. That is, there's a gender assignment, and there's usually some sort of given name. This is very powerful. This is an ascribed identity. Someone says, oh, look, male, let's call him John. Okay, that's a pretty good name. And if you don't think it's very powerful, think what happens. What's the first thing you ask when you hear someone's had a baby? You say, oh, was it a boy or a girl? And then the next question is, what did you call her? And if you say, well, I don't know, they kind of look at you like, And you say, well, what do you call her? I said, well, we're not really sure yet. Maybe in a couple of months we'll know. That doesn't work too well either. And in fact, if you don't do this very quickly, even the government will step in and get involved and go, okay, you got this kid, name it, and name it now. So, and disrupting this kind of ascribed status is actually very disruptive. So, for example, if I picked someone else, someone in class, here in the audience, let's pick you. Your name is?
Mark.
Mark. Okay, Mark. Well, I hate to tell you this, Mark, but you were switched at birth. You know, that's what your parents say. Well, I guess it's not a big surprise to you, but if that were to happen to you, just think of your identity. It's like, oh my God, even though something that happened 20, 30, 40 years ago, it's like, uh-oh, who am I? So it's a very powerful thing. So as I mentioned, there are sort of different processes or different dimensions involved in identity. There's legal, there's social, there's commercial, there are other realms like government. And we're just going to take a look at one social process for the moment, and that's status processes and their role in identity. Now, status processes are pretty interesting. They happen all the time, every day. They happen to everybody in this room. When people sit down and look at and try and gather information and say, well, who is this person? What are their characteristics? We're talking about working out this problem. Who's right? Is it them? Is it me? No one really knows. Where do I fit in this hierarchy? I'm not really sure. Let's find out. So what you're doing is you're gathering a lot of information about people in a status process, trying to figure out who's the leader, who's not the leader. Things might be demographic variables like age and gender and education. Or there might be very specific skills like networking skills or C++ programming skills. Those all help you sort of figure out, well, where do I belong? What's my identity? Now, we gather this information about others and about us through sort of direct and indirect means. That is, some of the information that we get from people, it's very direct. They say, where'd you go to school? I said, well, I got my degree at Stanford. Oh, okay, and I know that. And you say, well, how old are you? Well, I'm 52. Well, okay, that's good. And the deal is, often these kind of exchanges happen in the real world in face-to-face. And when you're in face-to-face interaction with people, there are a lot of verbal and nonverbal cues that are sort of going on back and forth. There's actually a very large bandwidth. And so now I'm going to have to pick on another audience member. Uh-oh. Who's it going to be? How about you? Will you play? Oh, okay. You speak English though, right? A bit? Uh-oh. Maybe not. Okay, well, how about you, sir? Sure? Yeah? Come. Okay. So what we're going to do is have a little face-to-face conversation, you and I, for about 60 seconds. And you can tell me whatever you like to tell me. It could be about your day, it could be about the conference, it could be about your work, your girlfriend. It doesn't really matter. Give me about 60 seconds worth of stuff.
I really wouldn't know where to start.
Oh, tell me about your day.
Well, I woke up at the Turnhalle
Okay.
after decently sleeping through the night, and got up and walked all the way here to get almost all the way here to get a decent cup of coffee because here at the Kanker Center it's I won't even get started.
Okay.
And then I just found the people I was here with. We sit down and.
Okay. What else? Go ahead.
Why are you standing so close?
Okay. Let's stop for a second. Thanks. You were a really good sport. Now, what you don't really think about consciously is this huge bandwidth of information that's being exchanged back and forth between the two of us. There are things that have been studied in the research, such as eye gaze. For example, looking while speaking is an indicator of high status. So if I do a lot of looking while speaking, or he did a lot of looking in my eyes directly while speaking, that indicates higher status. Looking while listening is another status indicator. If I look away while he's speaking, that's an indicator that I think he has lower status than I do, for example. Gestures are also important. Gestures out like this also indicate higher status. Speech rate, the number of non-fluencies, the ums, the ahs, and things like that are also indicators. And so there are a whole lot of different things, including space. You notice I sort of creeped up on him there, slowly and surely. And there are different sort of personal space parameters for people. If you don't believe me, if you have a significant other, walk down the sidewalk with him like this, and as you're walking down, just suddenly start to peel out like this, a little farther, a little farther, a little farther away, until he or she says, "What's wrong?" People monitor and exchange information very quickly, and there's a lot of bandwidth. So in face-to-face, that's really, really important. Okay, so now, the absence of verbal and nonverbal cues in the digital world really sort of disrupts this identity validation process. For example, one of the common communication channels is email. When someone sends you an email and their name is Heidi, what do you know about them? Well, they're female. Well, at least maybe, yeah, I don't know. Unless you've physically seen Heidi, you're not really sure. Well, maybe even when you've seen Heidi, you're not really sure. I don't know. Someone claims to be an expert Perl programmer. How do you verify that claim? Yes, yes?
Can you stay in the light?
Oh, yeah, stay in the light for the camera. Okay, sorry, I wander a lot. So they send you a sample of your code. You say, wow, this is a really cool code. Then you go, well, did they really write this stuff? I don't know. So there's a lack of cues that help you figure out who this person is in relationship to you and what they've told you about themselves. You say, well, that's okay. I got a webcam, and I got audio. That's okay. Now I'll be able to do everything. But we know from academic research that even with video and audio, even with decent cameras, you still miss a lot of stuff. You just don't get it. And so it's not an effective communication unless it's face-to-face. And in fact, if it were, why would I fly my tail 10 hours here and give this talk in freezing, Berlin when I live in Florida with palm trees and 70-degree weather and bunny rabbits? I could just do it from there, but it doesn't work that way. The second idea I sort of want to impress on you is that identity is a temporally unstable element. That is, persistence as a characteristic is a key attribute of identity. Now, every element of identity has its own sort of little separate timeline. Some elements of identity are very long. For example, you get a national identity card. I think you have one here in Germany. And in general, unless they screw up, that's your card for the rest of your life. Another example of a somewhat slow timeline is occupation. You often enter an occupation and you stay there for many years. Well, maybe some of you. Some of you like, oop, hired, oop, fired, oop, hired, oop, fired. But anyway, for the most part, you often stick it out for a while at a job. An example of a really short timeline is this RSA token around my neck. Every 60 seconds,